be like after COVID-19. And what we decided to do for today is to turn the tables upside down in the notion of expertise, and invited 4 medical students to join us. And they're senior medical students at Rutgers, New Jersey Medical School, and they're going to help us visualize and audiolize somehow the future after COVID-19. They are Robert Brumer, who is actually just got his PhD on Sunday, a few days ago. So he's Dr. Brumer, who's going to talk about telemedicine and global health. We have Jacob Reep, who goes by Jack Reep, who's going to talk about normalization of video chatting. We have Priya Kantesaria, who is going to talk to us about physician presence on social media, and Grace Rowe, who's going to talk about music and mental health. And we're so delighted that they were able to join us today. They have a very busy schedule. They study for exams. Actually, they're studying for the big exams, like the equivalent of the boards for physicians and other specialties. So we're very grateful that they were able to put some time aside and prepare these presentations for us. We also appreciate all the questions that you submitted upon registration. We're sensitive to the urgency of your request, and we're going to make an attempt to answer as many of the questions on this call. But we've got about 100 questions submitted, so the Q&A feature is also where you'll be able to ask questions during the session, which will be compiled and presented to the speakers after the presentations. There will also be a significant amount of time devoted to questions and answers at the end of the session. Thank you for your participation. I hope we can have a rich discussion and ensure our patient care questions are answered during our time together. To introduce you to our technology today, if you have not already registered, we ask that you register using the link in the chat. This session is being recorded and will be distributed and posted on the Rutgers Project ECHO website after the session, including any links and resources shared during the presentation. Finally, as the timeliness of this content changes with each passing day, if you are viewing this recording at a later time, realize that this may not be the most current information at the time you are viewing it. Note that information and websites for the New Jersey Department of Health, CDC, and COVID-19.nj.gov as resources for healthcare providers are provided on our New Jersey Project ECHO COVID-19 webpage. Thank you all so much for coming and for joining us today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rob, who's going to start us off with telemedicine and global health.
Thank you, Dr. Livunas. I'm just setting up my screen share. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rob Brumer, and I'll be sharing some ideas about my vision for the future of global medicine in the post-COVID world. Have any of you ever wanted to participate in global medicine programs? Have you been unable to do so because of barriers such as cost or inability to take long spans of time off of work? I learned about Doctors Without Borders, or MSF, in my high school French class, and I always thought it would be a cool program. But to work in the field, they want you to speak French and be able to commit 9 to 12 months of time. And additionally, while physicians working for MSF get paid, it's only about $20,000 a year, which is not always feasible for people dealing with student debt or other expenses. But what if there were another way? So global medicine is the delivery of healthcare to people who are in particular need around the world. There are many low and middle income countries in sub-Saharan Africa where the need for better healthcare delivery is particularly severe. On this map, we can see hospital coverage in sub-Saharan Africa. Only the regions shaded in green are within 2 hours of the nearest hospital. And that's a critical distance set by the World Health Organization for the provision of emergency services. You can see on the right in the breakdown by country that South Sudan is particularly affected. Fewer than 30% of the population lives close enough to a hospital. And of course, we're talking about more than just hospital care. There's an overall physician shortage in Africa, meaning that the delivery of primary care is difficult or impossible for much of the population. This is a map of the physician density in sub-Saharan Africa per 10,000 population. And you can see that more than half of these countries have fewer than 2 physicians per 10,000 population, a ratio of 1 to 5,000. In Malawi, that ratio is more than 1 to 60,000. So it's clear that many patients aren't receiving adequate care. Part of the challenge is also delivering care to the right places. For example, there's one county in Kenya where it's difficult to travel between villages because of the desert. Been to deploy camel-based clinics. Sorry, I got to update. Camel-based clinics. These animals are readily able to trek across the desert carrying heavy equipment and personnel to remote villages. But we live in the modern age, and I think we can apply technological solutions to these problems. So MSF launched a telehealth server in 2010. Physicians in remote areas are able to upload images and videos that can be interpreted by a specialist remotely. And they report on their website that more than 14,000 cases have been processed through the system. I think we can take it a little bit further than this. I'm not the only person who had that thought. There exist some programs that allow patients in Africa to video chat with physicians around the world. The largest of these is something called Zensi, and it serves patients in 8 countries. However, it requires patients to have access to a cell phone and internet so that they can video chat with physicians, and that's not always accessible throughout these regions. We can see here on a map of South Sudan that cellular coverage leaves something to be desired. This is a map of 2G cell coverage across South Sudan, and all the regions that aren't in purple are areas that don't have coverage. On the left, there's a list of settlements, and you can see the largest of these is almost 1 million people in an area that doesn't have basic 2G coverage. And 2G coverage is only about 1/10 of the data you need for video chat. So it's clear that we need an alternative for this plan to work for the millions of people living in areas without cell service. Well, what about satellites? Currently available satellite Wi-Fi hotspots cap out a little bit above what you need for a video chat. And we all know that the internet is never actually at the maximum speed promised. So it's likely that with current technology, latency and bandwidth would be an insurmountable obstacle for this to work. But Elon Musk, the founder of SpaceX, is currently working on a vision to globally deploy broadband internet satellites. And they plan to have this globally available by 2021. So let me offer you one vision of the future delivery of global medicine. What if instead of healthcare teams on camels, we deployed information technology teams that could equip remote villages with a tablet and a satellite hotspot? With some training and a user-friendly interface, people could be setting up appointments from anywhere in the world. And doctors anywhere in the world who want to get involved in global medicine can do so from their own offices or homes. And there's more applications to this than helping underserved areas in Africa. LGBTQ+ populations in hostile areas, whether that means Russia, Iran, or the Bible Belt, could access care without fear of being outed. Somebody in a country where they could be arrested for being gay could instead receive the psychiatric care and mental health support that they need. The same is true for people with substance use disorder. Rather than fearing legal consequences, say somebody who's suffering from alcohol use disorder in a country where it's illegal. They could privately meet with physicians remotely to discuss their problem and receive the care they need. And finally, I think we could use this for sexual health. What if a 17-year-old girl wants to meet with a gynecologist to talk about birth control options? In the US, she has the right to do that, but she might not feel comfortable making an appointment with her parents. If telehealth were an option, she could do that privately and receive the care she needs. So to that end, we should make sure that we don't lose the momentum that's been generated during this crisis. We need to make sure that telehealth is here to stay. The emergency provisions expanding telemedicine coverage, or some version of them, should be made status quo. We need regularly scheduled seminars for physicians to stay up to date with telehealth technology. Many physicians have had to adapt to new technology in the past couple of months, and we need to make sure that those skills stay sharp. Let's start a new paradigm. So here are some references and resources, and I'd like to thank Dr. Livunas, the Project ECHO team, and all of you for listening in.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Rob. Wonderful presentation. We're going to keep our questions and we're going to ask them to all presenters at the end. So let's move on to a normalization of video chatting. And Jack Reed is going to give us this presentation.
All right, let me share my screen here. Okay, thank you for having me, Dr. Livunas. The American social life has already been virtualizing, with 69% of US adults currently on Facebook. Moving forward, I envision video chat will become more just a usual way we pursue our social lives. I say this because I see two important factors have come together. First, we have the technology. And platforms like Google Hangouts and Zoom are available at no cost to anybody with a device and an internet connection. Second, we are all aware of the recent COVID pandemic and the necessity of social distancing. With both the means and the need coming together, we can see video chat not as a lesser approach to our social lives, but a new approach. Besides the social distancing benefits, video chat has other perks. No need to worry about travel logistics. And unlike just talking on the phone, you can still be face-to-face. Imagine video chat in our family relationships, especially with our elders who live alone but value their independence. While grandma lives by herself, her extended family across the country places an iPad at a dinner setting for her. Imagine video chat in our romantic relationships. Already, virtualization of our romantic lives has been happening with the rise of dating apps. 30% of adults have ever used a dating site or app, with that number being almost 50% for ages 18 to 29. Online dating has its risks, however. Imagine investing substantial time, money, and effort to meet a person only to find they are not somebody you wish to spend the next 5 minutes with, let alone a second date with. Instead, just have a no-cost, low-risk date over video chat. Beyond a first date, who says you can't continue building your relationship this way? Interestingly, for those who identify as lesbian, gay, or bisexual, online dating usage rates are much higher than the overall population. I'm not sure why that is. Perhaps it is more difficult to meet people in real life, hence the greater reliance on online dating. In that case, video chat may be exceptionally useful for these folks. Another possibility is that those who identify as lesbian, gay, or bisexual may be ahead of the social trends, and maybe we'll see video chat dating rise first in these populations. Also, for those who identify as asexual, the internet on websites such as Tumblr have always been an important place for learning about their identity and having community. Although some people who are asexual are also aromantic, many desire otherwise intimate relationships. Video chat may be exceptionally useful for these folks also. Next, potential downsides and other considerations of video chat. First off, despite being face-to-face, the full range of body language is lost, making it not truly a replacement for communicating together in real life. Second, physical contact may be necessary and irreplaceable in building romantic intimacy, and virtual dating for any longer than necessary may be unsatisfying for some people. Third, even though we have the technology overall as a society, inequities exist. Not everybody is privileged enough to have a device and the internet connection to use it. Fourth, after social distancing for over 2 months, maybe people would rather put down the device and engage with each other in the flesh. Now, what's beyond video chat? We all remember this scene from Star Wars. As for hologram chat, research and development is happening at places like Queen's University in Ontario and at Microsoft. Teledildonics. This is a term I just learned a few days ago. Teledildonics refers to the idea of sex remotely with real sensations in real time. For romantic relationships, the next steps in the future beyond normalizing video chat and what you can see may be the actual virtualization of sex itself and what you can feel. Here are some examples of existing technology on the market which uses Bluetooth and connects to a phone app. The left side picture here shows a tube that goes over one partner's penis and provides real-time sensations that are remotely controlled with this dildo. The right side picture is a set where one device is for clitoral stimulation and the other device is to remotely control the rate and intensity of the stimulation. And on that note, now you will remember me as that medical student who spoke about the remote controlled dildos. Here are some resources. Here are references. And that's the end. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much, Jack, and I can guarantee we'll remember much more than just that from your presentation. Thank you very much for this comprehensive review of video chatting. Let's move on to physician presence on social media, and I'm inviting Priya to give us this presentation.
Let me just unmute myself and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Priya Cantasaria. I'm a current fourth-year medical student at Rutgers, New Jersey Medical School. Today, I'm very excited to talk to you about the growth of physicians on social media. Social media has long been hailed as a vapid tool for individuals to share personal opinions and basic aspects of their day-to-day life. So why exactly should physicians be on social media? The answer is simple. Our patients currently receive an unprecedented amount of medical information online. 68% of parents use social media to find healthcare information for their children. 32% of patients do research online prior to their healthcare appointments. However, what's really frightening is how little of those patients share what they read online with their doctors. Only 50% of parents cross-check that information with their doctor, some believing that their doctors are either not interested or would chastise them for looking online. By keeping medical professionals from social media, we open up these spaces to allow for misinformation and bad medicine. One of the biggest paradigm shifts as it comes to social media has come from the COVID-19 pandemic. The combination of a complex and rapidly evolving public health crisis has made communicating online and not in person a necessity. One of the biggest changes is the fact that COVID has highlighted the need for publicly facing healthcare providers to combat coronavirus misinformation. One of the ways that this was done was through an expedited verification process on Twitter, so that credible coronavirus healthcare professionals could instantly combat misinformation. This little blue check mark gave credibility in the eyes of the public. Social media has also played an important role in the development of advocacy during COVID-19. Hashtags like #GetMePPE were shared by over thousands of professionals and highlighted the need for adequate protective equipment. Videos like the one screenshotted here were watched by over 33,000 people, demonstrating how viral social media could be used to amplify a specific cause. Finally, social media has served as a great space for COVID care updates. Popular groups like the PMG COVID-19 Facebook group has over 37,000 members, all doctors from across the world, from China, Italy, New York, really discussing all different ways to combat coronavirus, discussing emerging techniques and their own personal anecdotes, even before some of the first case studies and articles were published. Looking to the future, there's so much more potential for physicians on social media. Video platforms like shown here, like TikTok, have seen the rise of doctors who use trendy dances. Just like the Macarena, but far more complicated, to share patient information points over the screen to educate the public about common gynecological care myths. Twitter has also blossomed into a space for networking and mentorship. I've included a screenshot here from a Twitter chat I personally organized with the Twitter Psychiatry Residency Group to really discuss what the residency process would look like this year. For students stuck in quarantine and fearful about what the future looks like, this was finally an opportunity to speak to program directors and residents from across the country. With a simple tweet or Facebook message, medical professionals across the world can really connect with one another. Finally, our current climate has really shown the necessity for powerful social media messaging as a tool for advocacy. Included here is a digital campaign from SNMA, which shows and highlights how racism indeed is a public health issue. Social media can be a phenomenal tool, but it's not without its own limitations. Before creating your Twitter account, I urge you to consider the ethics of your involvement. One of the most important details is that a physician's social media should separate their personal and professional content. Simply put, you cannot accept your patient's friend request on your private Facebook profile. However, you could create a separate public profile to interact with the public. This separation is absolutely necessary, not only for the physician, but for the patient. It first provides the patient with privacy. People often post on social media many things they don't want their doctor to know. For example, how often have you asked a college-age patient, do you drink alcohol? Often they say no, even though they may be the president of their fraternity. Similarly, it removes a burden from the physician. Having access to all of your patient's thoughts and actions often feels like you're on call on social media all the time. Having a separate professional and personal account will create that barrier to maintain a professional relationship. Finally, the most important consideration is involving patient confidentiality. As with any type of publishing, a patient's privacy and confidentiality must be protected. If you share a personal anecdote on social media, when rereading that post, there should be no way for the public to identify your patient. Many specialty societies and medical societies have published their own ethical guidelines as it relates to social media. Finally, there are many opportunities for medicine to embrace social media. As this slide states, social media can bolster or diminish the public's perception of healthcare providers. A prime example of this is everyone's maybe not so favorite TV doctor, Dr. Oz. Although he initially started off as a verified source of information, his content on social media and blatant focus on selling diets made him lose the vast majority of his credibility. However, social media, done under great scrutiny and through the lens of ethics, can be a positive tool to develop an important conversations in healthcare. For all of you that are now considered joining social media, I crafted this little appendix to help you get started. I finally would like to give a thank you and a large shout out to Dr. Lavunas and the NJMS ECHO team for giving me this opportunity, and to the audience for giving me your attention today. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Priya. Now let's move on to our final presentation. Grace Rowe is going to talk to us about music and mental health.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Grace Rowe, and I'm a fourth-year medical student at Rutgers NJMS. Today, I'm going to be talking about music in the post-COVID era. Now, to share a little bit about myself, I first began playing the violin at the age of 7. And since then, music has been a really big part of my identity and experiences. So before I share my slides and get the presentation going, I want to do a little exercise. So I'm going to perform for you 2 pieces separated by a brief break in between. Now, as you listen, I want you to pay close attention to what comes to mind. Is it a memory, an emotion, a thought, a word? And we'll see what we find. All right, now with the power invested in me as one of the speakers, I'm going to call out a couple members of our Project ECHO team. So, Ruben, are you there?
I'm here.
Can you tell us, what was your experience listening to the first excerpt?
The first ballad was very calming, and I felt like I was just relaxing somewhere, seeing some water, and just kicking back, really.
All right, and Clement, what did you think or feel while listening to the second piece?
You know, Ruben, I completely agree with you. I was going to say that I think I was in like nature or something, like in an area where I feel at peace. So that was, and yeah, that's what I felt.
For the second piece?
And for the second piece?
I mean, you could, but
Oh, I'm sorry. For the first, sorry about that.
that's
But
okay.
for the first piece, yes, I did feel the relaxation. The second piece, I felt like I was like, more alert, like, something's going on. I had to pay attention to something, like, the opposite of feeling relaxed.
All right, thank you so much for sharing. Now, the first piece that I played for you is from Camille Saint-Saëns' The Carnival of the Animals. And that particular piece is called The Swan. Now, the second piece is from that same piece, but it was called The March of the Lions. So they're two completely different styles of music, and I'm sure they elicited very unique responses within each of you. So the powerful effects of music have been studied in various ways. So this study here on the left shows that patients who listened to calming music after open heart surgery had statistically significant increases in relaxation and oxytocin. Now, you may have heard of oxytocin as the love or the cuddle hormone because it's associated with pair bonding, attachment, and social connection. Here on the right is from another study that found that cortisol levels in patients listening to music after surgery were reduced. As you may know, cortisol is the main hormone that's released when we experience stress. So throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, many of you probably saw music in the news and on YouTube. I've read about healthcare workers who provided bedside music for patients through donated devices. Medical teams played empowering songs as recovered patients were discharged home. Frontline workers themselves have used music as a vessel to share their message of hope and resilience. So what can we learn from all of this? I encourage you all to further explore the evidence-based medicine regarding music. You may be surprised that music therapy is much more than just listening to your favorite song. Music therapists go through extensive training to explore the effects of listening to music, playing instruments, moving to music, and more. And researchers are also exploring the potential beneficial effects of participating in musical groups and belonging to such a community. So one thing that I've certainly learned during my clerkship year is that in medicine, there's one thing we all wish we had more of: time. So how can we introduce music into medicine without it taking away from other important components of a health visit? You may also wonder, well, if our patients are always connected to their earphones and playlists, will they become too detached from their surroundings? I know when I see someone with earphones in public, my immediate response is, they probably don't want to be bothered by me right now. So here's what I suggest. As any conversation starter, ask your patient, do you like music? And if they say, sure, yeah, perhaps you can start by encouraging your patient to create a lifelong playlist using their devices to add songs that empower them throughout various life events. Songs that inspire them, remind them of a happy memory, get them through a challenging time, and so forth. Growing up, I remember many doctor visits where I sat in the waiting room, listening to unfamiliar elevator music. Sometimes no music at all. All I could hear was my own pen tapping the clipboard as I filled out the forms. Once I got into the exam room, I couldn't help but notice the creaky floor, signaling that any minute the doctor would walk right through the door. I could hear the crinkling tissue paper on the exam table as I swung my legs back and forth nervously. No wonder white coat hypertension is a real thing. But do you think your patient's experience could change if, say, they brought their earphones to play their favorite playlist in the waiting room and then in the exam room before you come in? If music has been shown to decrease stress levels in surgical patients, could it also reduce stress in patients just waiting to get their recent test results and diagnosis? My colleagues have shared with you how technology is rapidly advancing. So it makes me wonder how music and medicine might look years down the line. Let's say your middle-aged patient recently had knee replacement surgery, but gets really nervous about her weekly physical therapy sessions. What if part of your recommendation would be to make sure to pack your headphones in a charged phone so you have access to the playlist throughout? As I mentioned earlier, some doctors have connected professional musicians to perform music at isolated COVID patients' bedside. What if we could create a movement for volunteer musicians to provide this form of virtual service and music therapy for any interested patients moving forward? It would bypass barriers such as traveling, scheduling, and sterilization. The point I'm trying to make is that music can be used as a tool during moments of high stress, anxiety, and pain. But like any other type of therapy, there must be a healthy balance. While it may be important for our patients to be present in their surroundings, interact with their family and their loved ones, music can just be one of the resources they use to detach from everything going on around them and relax. I want to conclude this talk with a quote by Dr. Richard Kogan, a psychiatrist and concert pianist who often combines the two in very interesting ways. And he says, "I believe that music is an underutilized modality in healing, and that it is essential for all clinicians not to lose sight of music's unparalleled capacity to lift spirits, soothe anxiety, and reduce pain." Now, it might be difficult to find one song that can accomplish all three of these things, but even just one could be really valuable for your patient. I've included some resources for you to learn more about music therapy in the field in itself. I've also included a link to a TED-Med talk by Dr. Kogan. And lastly, I've included a link to a virtual music cover that I worked with Jack, one of our previous speakers, and 14 other medical students. It was a great experience, so I hope you can check it out. These are the references and direct links to the articles that I mentioned in the talk. And thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much, Grace. This was wonderful, both the presentation and the performance itself. We rarely have the luxury or and the pleasure of having this combination there. So thank you very much. Okay, and now we can turn to the Q&A part of the session today. And let's take some questions that are coming in from the audience. The question is for Priya. How would you advise screening medical professional opinions on their platforms? Unfortunately, I've seen nurses on TikTok postings which they talk about STDs and STIs, and their language has been condescending. So how do we, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's one of the biggest concerns when I talked about the difference that a professional can make in kind of bolstering, their opinion versus making them seem much more negative. So I think the first thing is one thing that you've already mentioned is that you're on TikTok, you're actually experiencing what a lot of these, lay people are doing. TikTok is an app mainly aimed towards young adults, adolescents, and children. So, if you're taking the opportunity to amplify something that's on a social media site, looking into that and saying, okay, does this have the message I want to share? Or can I find another professional that's sharing a similar message in a tone that I would prefer? So the first thing is kind of utilizing your ability to choose when you have this wide variety of people posting content, and then identifying those whose tone mimics what you would like to share. I know I personally have found, a 50-50 in regards to some of the health professionals on TikTok, where some of them are much more educational, do a lot more evidence-based medicine. And then those are the ones that I choose to actually save the video of, amplify, either through my likes, either through the shares that I give them on social media. And then the ones that, are a little bit more, either the information may not be as accurate, or maybe they're using more inflammatory language, or they're derogatory, keeping those. And, if my patient, or for instance, or someone that I'm talking to about this is utilizing that person, offering them up a suggestion that's an alternative. So, you know, you don't like X, Y, and Z user, but you like ABC user, offering up ABC users and amplifying their voice. And of course, if you're someone that is the one that's posting, I think the most important thing that you can realize on social media is you're not giving personal medical advice. You're not talking to a single individual on, you know, on these platforms. You're basically offering general advice. So, you know, there should be no judgment when you're offering general advice.
That's great information.
But that was it.
To cover. So, great. Let's take one of the questions from the online list, and I will address that to Jack. How will our teenagers socialize after COVID-19?
Mm-hmm. So, as presented in the normalization of video chatting presentation, future options for children as well as adults could be video chat socialization. Plenty of teens are already freely on social media and communicate with all types of friends and even strangers all over the world through multiplayer video games like Fortnite and Call of Duty. Furthermore, video chat apps designed for children, such as Just Talk Kids, exist, which have encryption and parental control over who the children are allowed to chat with. That being said, stranger danger certainly still exists. Children and adolescents cannot be expected to have the same character judgment and social decision-making abilities as adults and can be vulnerable to be taken advantage of. Going along with the ideas of normalizing video chat, children can be socially educated from a younger age to only video chat with people they know from school, real life, or whom they already have relationships with from elsewhere, and to maintain that vigilance as they grow from children into teenagers and adolescents.
Okay, great. Any other ideas from our panelists about our teenagers socializing in the new normal?
I just wanted to add something that is a little bit, in some ways, controversial or challenging for us as adults. You know, we didn't grow up with online presence, so I think there was a dearth of literature on, as soon as, you know, all the online stuff started, that how detrimental screen time is for our kids. And sometimes I wonder if we are a little bit biased because this is how we were not raised. Because in some ways, COVID-19 is really showing us how online presence can actually be very helpful to our children. Just sort of give you one small example. My son is an introvert and he doesn't socialize that easily, but he then found a friend on Roblox, which is his favorite game. And that really gets him connected to his classmates and feel connected. So there were a lot of questions about worrying about how children will connect to each other. And I think as parents, as adults, as psychiatrists, we need to sometimes lean in to that experience and figure out what is a safe way to do that and encourage that.
Okay.
And Dr. Agarwal, I can speak from personal experience to those online friendships from a formerly socially awkward kid in middle and high school being incredibly valuable. I mean, I actually recently started playing a game that I played 10 years ago, and somebody messaged me saying, "Hey, I remember you from 2008." And then we've been reconnecting, and like it's a real meaningful connection. And just because it's online doesn't mean it's not valuable.
Wow. Great. Next, we'll have a question about white coat hypertension. I'd love to learn more about white coat hypertension. I love the idea of using headphones and listening to calming tunes. I think that would probably be for Grace.
All right, so I guess I probably should have mentioned or explained it because it was in my talk, but we can definitely talk about that now. So white coat hypertension is something that we all learn about, especially as medical students. It's basically this concept that when patients come and get their health visits, some of them have so much anxiety, so much nervousness, like that naturally, as like you could call it their stress response, their blood pressure skyrockets. And that's the main reason why when we diagnose people with hypertension, we rely on at least 2 measurements of elevated blood pressure. Because in the moment, perhaps the patient ran over to the office and was sweating, panting, blood pressure's up the roof. Or perhaps they're really nervous about maybe they're going to be told they have hypertension and they've never been diagnosed with anything before. Going off of that, now also with technology, with blood pressure cuffs that you can use at home, doctors are also instructing patients to measure their blood pressure every day at a certain time, instead of relying strictly on what's measured in the office. So my point that I was making is that white coat hypertension could probably could really affect people's mental state in the office as well, even if you're not checking for hypertension. Maybe you have the results of someone's recent lab reports, and you walk in, this person is so physically and emotionally unstable. How are you going to break the news to them if they have all these other preconceptions and concerns in their mind already? So I was proposing that if you introduce music or whatever it is that works for them, to at least bring them to a calmer state of mind, then you can have that conversation. You can address what their real concerns are and hopefully have a productive conversation.
Great. I just can say about the white coat hypertension that it's not just the unfamiliar surroundings. I literally go down the hall and see my doctor, somebody whom I know extremely well from our everyday work. And then as soon as I get the cuff on, my blood pressure is at least 10, 15, 20 points above normal, maybe 10, not 20. But still, it's a very real phenomenon, no matter what. Okay, we got a comment about how will telehealth be paid for? What about insurance, global insurance? How about immigrants in the United States that do not have any insurance? How is that going to work? A reasonable, very reasonable question. Anybody has any ideas on this one?
Well, I would say as far as global telehealth, it's likely that it would be paid for with similar methods to current global health. That is mostly through donations and governmental support, such as through NGOs. However, that might be, it's a little bit more sustainable to get a supplemental income from one of those organizations rather than to survive on the $20,000 a year that would be your entire income from MSF. As far as immigrant populations in the United States, we would probably have to rely on our social medical insurers such as Medicaid and Medicare to provide funding for that.
Okay.
Just wanted to add, Petros. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I was going to the next one. Go ahead.
A lot of medical organizations, including APA, are really asking that whatever insurance billing is happening now in COVID-19, it continues after that. So we will have, the hope is that telepsychiatry, telemedicine will have the same billing as we are doing it now. But the truth of the matter is there isn't adequate insurance in the country for many, many, many of our people today. And that telepsychiatry can't really solve. But telepsychiatry can solve is that there's many more of us in New Jersey and very few in certain parts of the country. And in some ways, that's the struggle, at least that balances out.
Yeah, great. Now we have a comment. It's not a question, but I'm going to read it. It says, it is great as a WWP High School South counselor to see Grace Rowe. She has been a phenomenal young lady and we miss her, but we know she's doing great things. Thank you, Grace. And your coach, Mrs. Walsh, is excited that you're doing this. So I didn't want to put you on the spot, Grace, but she's coming from Cheryl Smith. So we're delighted that that we have this, and we have you, Grace, with us. All right, let me take another one from the online people. What more can be done to be sure frontline nurses and doctors are protected by having adequate PPE? If I can address that to Priya.
Sure. So although the scramble for adequate PPE has jumped out of the public eye, there's still plenty of need to address PPE shortages. So one of the most important things you can actually do is amplify the stories and struggles of those fighting those battles. So either sharing those to social media, forwarding them over to your public health officials, to your hospital leadership or to your school leadership. It's so interesting, but public scrutiny and outrage is actually one of the fastest ways to mobilize leaders to put into effect change. Thinking a little bit bigger, you can also call your local and national legislative representatives. even if your area is currently not experiencing a shortage, there are national bills that are in play right now. One example that I can think of is the COVID-19 Emergency Manufacturing Act, introduced both in the House and the Senate, which aims to provide basically increased amount of PPE manufacturing so that when, or if, hopefully if, but when the second wave of coronavirus hits, we don't have the same PPE shortages. Those type of big national movements always need supporters, especially from people across, the United States. So being able to call your representatives and have a conversation saying, this is my role, I support this, I really think that we need to have this happening. Those are really great ways to start nationally looking to get adequate PPE.
Okay, thanks. So now I'm going to take one. It says, do you have any information regarding the continued relaxation of HIPAA regulations in regard to telemental health? I think that this is something that's going to be something in between. There are a lot of organizations, including the American Psychiatric Association and the American Society of Addiction Medicine, that are pushing for making some of this relaxation, some of this broadening of the regulations more permanent, but it's not going to be as relaxed as it is now. Specifically, what I'm thinking here is at this point we have FaceTime and we have a bunch of very routine commercial platforms that are allowed for telemedicine. Most likely in the future, we're going to have a list of allowed platforms, which are going to be much, much longer than the ones that we had before COVID, but they're not going to be as free for all as it seems to be right now. So we're going to land somewhere in between. Let's go back to music. How do you suggest using music in the high school health office to alleviate anxiety at school?
All right, thank you for the question. I feel really old now thinking back to when I was in high school. But yeah, when I think back, at least for me, because music was such a big part of my life, I remember way back in maybe 3rd grade, I think it was mandatory that everyone did choir, I think. And we would all get together or take music class. I mean, we'd get together, we'd learn the basics of music, play like different instruments from around the world. Like it was a privilege to have that type of musical education that was just part of our curriculum. But I think as we got older, once we got to middle school, now there was the option to do music, and music became something that only some people who wanted to continue it did it. And otherwise, it just completely like fizzed out for the rest of the students. So at this point, I'm not too familiar with how much power I would have in terms of education and being inside the school and stuff like that. But I think it's good to encourage students, especially students who enjoy music, if they play an instrument, encourage them to continue playing and use it as a source of relaxation or an outlet amidst all the craziness of SATs and extracurriculars and volunteering and everything and getting good grades. Like, my point is that music is one of the things that makes us human. It's something that you can carry with you no matter what field you go into, whether it's medicine or engineering, whatever it is. And there's a lot of things you can get out of it that can help you in the long run. So to directly answer your question, what can you do now, like for high school students? Maybe, one thing they do in the hospital is they have like meditation rooms, or they have like wellness rooms. Maybe you could create a space like that where students can just sit, forget about everything and just listen to music or perform music or something like that, or have a conversation with someone about music. I know in my high school, we used to play songs, I think, between classes or at the end of the day. And that was something that connected us as well. Like my friends and I talk about these old throwback songs. And when I think of the song, I think about the walls of my high school. So if that can have such a big impact, imagine where else you could kind of weave in music throughout the school day. Maybe before exams, you can play for your class some classical music. And students can kind of take that time to really focus, gain some confidence and take their exam. So I think you have to be creative, you have to kind of think outside the box, but it's totally doable, I think.
Oh, Grace, I just got 2 ideas from what you were saying. Number one, imagine if they had like a space in the school, maybe in the nurse's office or something, where it was like the, if a kid like needs like, I need 5 or 10 minutes to chill, a space where a kid can go and maybe be able to sit with like an iPad with a pair of headphones and play like some music on it and like, take a few minutes, like a mental health space where they can like listen to music or something like that. And my second thought was, in addition to just playing instruments, I think what's very popular nowadays, both on the computer and on all the smartphones and tablets, is electronic music. I think kids today are, playing instruments, but they're also like, making synthesizer music and other electronic music like on their iPad. And I think that's, as playing instruments is great. And I think also making electronic music like that is also great too. And especially for those of us who grew up as musicians without, that type of electronic technology, I think we should also, embrace the new age, or at least, be open to letting the kids embrace the new age.
Uh-huh. Okay.
And just to add to that, sometimes in expanding music, just the idea of natural music and sounds like listening to birds chirping or the waves crashing and all those kinds of things, I think can be an extension of music as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right, we're coming towards the close here. So I want to, but we do have a few minutes, and I want to open it up to a more general discussion now of re-entry. We've got a lot of questions on the internet about how do we help people going back to work? How do we help the students going back to school? What's our responsibility as mental health professionals towards the general public, and how can we help best? I mean, this is the voice that I've been hearing from the online chat and the questions. And I want to open that up. Probably maybe, Rashi, you can start with this and see if we have some ideas that can help our participants.
I think picking up on the theme of almost like social media presence that has come up a lot today, it's like there's so much out there today in the news on what is safe and what is not safe. I think having a meaningful, in some ways it becomes our job to sort of sort out the data and think about what actually it means to day-to-day life. Like, we started the conversation informally by talking about masks and what is safe and what is not safe. It is a sad reflection of where we are in the country, where there isn't a unified guideline on what should be done. And when there are guidelines, there's enough of a distress where many people wonder if these guidelines are politically motivated or not, and should we follow it? So it's almost like we all are assessing individual risk. And I think it behooves us as physicians, as students who are aware of this, to sort of sift through the data and make recommendations to the best of our knowledge we can, knowing that it might change based on the information that's coming. So at this time, it does seem that even though the cases are going down and it seems a little bit safer to emerge, social distancing, or I should say physical distancing, and masks are something that we should all start to get our children comfortable with, because for some of the children who have never worn masks, it will not be an easy transition.
Yeah, it does feel like it's here to stay, much to my disappointment. And I do think we're going to develop new forms of communication, not only the electronic ones, but the physical ones as well. For example, a lot of the shaking of the head to replace the smiling. I find myself walking and seeing somebody and smiling to them, thinking that registers. And of course, it doesn't register because I wear a mask. And then I will have to adjust my body language to take that into consideration. And I use my head and even more my hands than I already do. So there is going to be a transition and an adaptation there for that.
And I think one of the most important, or probably one of the most significant barriers that we're going to face is just people being afraid to go back. Hospitals are already facing problems getting people to come in for elective procedures because they don't want to come into the hospital. We're going to have parents who don't want to send their kids to school, or kids who don't want to go. And somehow we're going to have to address this anxiety over what frankly is not that unreasonable of a fear, especially towards the beginning of the situation when things were changing minute by minute. People being afraid of this is a rational response. So finding ways to help people cope and understand how they can safely retransition, I think will be important. And just to offer them that support network that they need to talk about their fears.
Okay. You just have got a message: wearing a mask by children is a very controversial issue. They have to be able to properly use it, and affects their social, emotional state. Very, very good point. And there's another comment here. Earlier, someone mentioned Roblox and her son having connections there. I also have a Roblox kid, and our pediatrician has suggested decreasing screen time. This makes it difficult while school is happening online and children having their social engagements online as well. Should we be considering adjusting the views of how much screening people are having in general?
I think we have already adjusted our views of what's normal for us. Like, I can't tell you the number of hours I spend in front of the screen in all the meetings and classes we do for our students and residents. So I think we've already adjusted it for the adults. And even if it was like, there's no way you can prevent it for our kids. They will be online.
Yeah.
All their work today is online. So I agree. The guidelines have to change.
We got one more comment here. Is if music is so valuable, why not have an ICD code for musicians that can be paid? They do get paid for music therapy, but you have to be trained in music therapy. We don't have ICD codes for musicians in general. Maybe we should, because it could very be so, it could be so therapeutic. So a couple of things. We are launching our substance use disorders and mental health echo. This is going to happen the third Friday of the month from 12 to 1. Dr. Agarwal and myself are going to be leading, along with guest speakers and case presenters and panelists, and we're going to go through the entire substance use disorders. You're going to be getting the schedule very soon. We finalized it today with Rashi, and I think we have exciting topics, not only the drugs of abuse, but also we're going to talk about vicarious traumatization, pregnancy, issues of depression and suicide, racism, homophobia, social determinants of health. So we'll have an array of excellent topics, along, of course, with the substance use disorder. So do join us third Friday of the month from now until the end of the year. Let me just thank you for attending and participating. This session has been recorded and will be also made available on our New Jersey Project ECHO COVID-19 webpage. We'd also like your feedback regarding your interest in participating in subsequent sessions on this subject. Please take a few moments to complete our post-session survey so that we will gauge our interest and plan for upcoming sessions. And with that, I'm closing the COVID-19 special ECHO series. We've been with you for the past 8 Fridays. It's been a wonderful arc working with Dr. Agarwal, Dr. Chen, and everybody else. Special thanks to Ruben for the technical assistance, and a special thing for the medical students who were able to join us today. Thanks all so much. Have a great weekend. Come back on the third Friday of the month and join us for the substance use disorders and mental health echo. Bye-bye now.